Because in my thinking, in 2023, after the State of the Union address, which was a very good, well-delivered address.
Yeah.
You see the president engaging Republicans, putting them back on their heels, scoring political points, real time. And
Social Security, there was that battle to give and take.
Yes, beautifully done.
Yeah.
That's the moment you go to the president and say, sir, you're not running in 24.
Yeah.
If I'm the party chairman, I go to the senior leadership and say, this was wonderful. But this we know the background here. We know the underlying truths of, getting up for one game, right?
Yeah.
When you've got 24 more in front of you.
Right.
Over the next 2 years. So why didn't they? Why didn't the Democratic leadership, who later betrayed their relationship with the president, just to put it as bluntly as I can, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, go to him in 23 and said, we know you said you want to be a transitional president, and you have been. Yeah. And so we're now prepared to move on. I have a thought, but I want to hear why you think they didn't.
Well, it seems like no one wanted to cross him. Like his team was so convinced, first of all, he wanted to win and he was and run, and he was dead set on doing that. And then, his team also didn't want to cross him. And they pointed to, the fact that he had successes, some legislative victories. They felt like he had a good first term and that he could successfully run on it. But once again, they were sort of blind to the bigger picture and were missing certain elements of what the electorate, I think, really wanted. And that was a huge blind spot, I think, for them. And I think that's why a lot of people are, shooting arrows in his direction and his team's direction right now. Someone told us that Mike Donnellan said, you don't walk away from the plane. You don't walk away from the house and the chopper. This was a guy, and I believe Jill Biden as well, got used to living at the White House. He always wanted to be president. He was finally president. He didn't want to walk away. He felt like he had earned the right to be there and to run again.
Okay.
I would just add to that.
Oh, okay. Look, there are a lot of things I want to be and feel I've earned, but reality is a bitch.
No, but I would love to hear your view on this because you said.
So yes. So my theory on this boils down to two words: Kamala Harris.
Right.
What do you do with a problem like Kamala Harris? Now you need to hear that in the tunes of what do you do with a problem like Maria, right? From Southern music. I'm a theater kid. What can I say? But really, that at the end of the day is their underlying problem. Yeah. They have a black woman sitting up there on Mass Avenue in the house at the observatory as the vice president of the United States, and they did not want to have to deal with her. They did not want her to be their nominee. They did not think that she could win, and they were not prepared to do anything to make sure that fortune turned around so that she could win, because there were a whole lot of folks who had ambitions, partly laid out in the conversation with Governor Shapiro and trying to bring him onto the ticket. He was like, oh, no, that's all right. I'm good. Because I want the job you're seeking. I'm not going to be your number two. It takes me out of play. He ain't stupid. Yeah. And Gavin, all this leveling up Gavin Newsom, oh, let's have an open convention. Oh, let's have a short primary. All of these things were pieces that underscored the narrative that they had a problem, that Joe Biden put them in an awkward position. And even on the day he resigned, the idea of running for the presidency, there was that 3-hour gap, because I remember it happened right as we were ending our show on the weekend, that the president comes out with this announcement that he's not going to run. And then by 1 or 2 o'clock, he says, oh, and by the way, I'm endorsing the black woman, in which case it was hair on fire. So that's kind of my thinking, that really what sort of gummed up a lot of the movement to get Joe out of the race is that they had a sitting vice president that no one knew what to do with.
I think you're very right about that, Michael, at least in terms of the Democratic leadership. The first thing I would say is somebody who spoke to Nancy Pelosi right after the debate in June said that her initial response was that she was worried that the bum rush to get rid of Biden would go so fast that Harris would be inserted, and that she had to try to stop that from happening. She did not have any faith in Kamala Harris. Barack Obama had this fantasy baseball open convention idea going that he was pushing and pushing and pushing. And we report in the book for the first time actually what happened between Biden and Harris when they did the handoff. So he calls her up and he says, "Listen, I'm going to get out." And she says, "Are you sure? Don't let him push you out." And he said, "No, I'm sure." And then and he says, "I've got a statement ready to go." And she goes, "Well, are you going to endorse me?" And he says, "You've got my support, kid." And she said, "I see you laughing, Michael, because you've been part of these discussions before." and basically she's like, "That's not an endorsement."
No,
and Joe Biden's got all these delegates to the convention, and Barack Obama wants an open convention, and Nancy Pelosi wants an open convention. And she's like, "If you don't endorse me, everybody's going to see that as a rejection of me. And it's going to go somewhere else. Like, this is the moment. And if you don't endorse me, you're going to be telling everybody you made the wrong choice in picking me as your vice presidential candidate way back when." And of course, like, Biden actually, like, what he wants to do is take a few days, because he wants to do like this kind of like victory lap where he praises himself for being like George Washington and giving up power voluntarily. So he says to her, "Maybe Thursday I'll endorse you." And she's like, "Not Thursday. Like, this is all going to go down today." And so finally he says, "Well, you're making some good points. Let me call you back." And he gets with his guys and she gets with her guys, and she writes up a statement for him, and he gets back on the phone with her and he says, "All right, we're going to do two statements today. One is my statement. We'll let that sit for a while, and then you'll get your statement." And she's like thinking like, okay, like maybe 1 minute between those, because the second you send out the one thing and it doesn't mention her, then everybody's like, "Why isn't he endorsing her?" Which is exactly what happened. You were talking about being on the air when it happened. That's exactly what happened on the air on MSNBC. Was where's this going? I remember I was on right after it happened and before the endorsement came, and I said, "Look, I don't think there's any way he doesn't end up endorsing her," because I went through all the sort of mental calculations of where people would line up and what the destructiveness of the Democratic Party leadership trying to skip over Kamala Harris, Black woman vice president, who had the support of the Congressional Black Caucus and the very vocal support of the Congressional Black Caucus. But this is how crazy it was. Biden calls Clyburn to ask him about it. He says, "I got this statement that he's going to leave the race." He's like, "I got this statement." And Clyburn's like, "It's a great statement, Mr. President, but it doesn't mention Kamala Harris. Where's Kamala Harris?" And Biden's like, "Oh, I'll get to her. We'll do two statements." And then Clyburn's like, "Well, hurry up and put your statement out, because I need to endorse her," because he had this 5 o'clock call with Obama that day.
Right.
5:30 call when it was in the evening. And this is Clyburn's like, "Obama's going to try to rope me into this, open primary, open convention idea.
Yeah.
And I need to endorse her first so that by the time I get on the phone with him, he can't, cajole me into doing it." So that's what happens. They end up having a 1-minute phone conversation where Clyburn's like, "I'm sorry, Mr. President, I already endorsed her. My hands are tied. Nice talking to you." And you should get behind the vice president. But like all of this insanity going on behind the scenes, I think you're right, Michael. There's a lot of discomfort with Kamala Harris as the candidate, particularly from Obama, who wanted his fingerprints off of it, and from Pelosi, who, I think in a lot of ways had more courage than anyone else, because I think she had to get out, and it was happening more slowly than she would have liked, and a lot more slowly than a lot of the members of Congress would have liked and the candidates would have liked, because they were worried he was going to pull them down, and nobody would say it. And she didn't outright call for him to leave the race, but there were several times during that 24 days where she just kind of did a little public push.
Look,
and so,
she
was, I think.
No, I was going to say, the reality is she couldn't. She is in the most untenable position possible as the sitting vice president. She cannot go to the president and go, "Dude, you need to step down," because that is all self-interest, right? And
right, that benefits her.
It benefits her. And reporters like you two sitting there will be chomping at the bits, trying to go after all of this, just trying to, pull the pieces apart, and it just creates a nightmare. So she's off the table. The question, Amie, is the party has to come to the realization that you have an elderly gentleman who's showing his age. I don't think Joe Biden was so much cognitively impaired as he was just impaired by age, right?
Yeah.
I've been in space with the man. I've had conversations with the man, and every time, you walk away and go, yeah, he old as shit. But that doesn't mean he couldn't do. I've walked away from Donald Trump saying, he's crazy as fuck. So I'd rather have old as shit as opposed to crazy as fuck sitting down in 1600. All right. That for me was the essence of both the 16 and 20, the 20 and the 24 elections.
Yeah.
But
Michael, why should Democrats? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, what?
I was just going to say, why should Democratic voters settle for, my guy is better than the other guy, or my woman is better than the other guy or woman? Like, they should be able to find somebody that they can put out there that shares their values, that is like gangbusters.
Well, that's why I said 2023 was so important, because you know this. You're looking at the arc here. First off, your messaging is all off to begin with. Second of all, you've got a candidate that at some point becomes very clear he doesn't want to move on, but yet everyone around him knows he should. And nobody has figured out A, how to deal with that, B, how to deal with Kamala, and C, probably more importantly, to your point, putting forward a candidate who could then stand up against Trump in a way in which you could actually hold those 7 battleground states. Yeah. Because that was always a crapshoot, Amie, for the Democrats.
Yeah, and we report in this book how Biden was trying to undermine, his people were trying to undermine Kamala Harris in those final days.
Talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were sending notes to donors, emails, which John and I have reviewed, basically saying, if you kick him out of the race, you're going to be left with her. Which is amazing when you think about it. I mean, this is his.
I mean, Biden is drowning Harris in order to keep his head above water, when it's clear to everyone else he's not going to make it downriver.
No, because that boat's got a gaping hole in it.
Yeah, and this is coming from his personal team. I mean, it's astounding.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And they put it in emails, the texts. I mean, there's electronic records of it. As Amie said, we reviewed some of this stuff. These messages are like so clear of Biden people being like, Kamala Harris is an absolute disaster. If you do that, everything goes to shit. And
well, look, they kept her on lockdown for the first 2 years.
Right.
And then gave her these god-awful assignments. We need you to go be the border czar, as well as deal with all the Black people in the country. Oh, and by the way, when you get a chance, could you go to Europe and do a little foreign policy too?
And that he has put her in a position to potentially run after him, even if he doesn't run. And they just beat the heck out of her, right? Like, they're like constantly making things. And look, presidents always give vice presidents bad gigs, but there was no support from inside the White House for her. And then it turns into them trashing her to all the people that she's going to need to raise money from, that she's going to need to get to vote for her. And it's no wonder that when she, that by the time she gets out of the, out there and campaigning, she's not 100% confident in herself, because she's spent all this time getting trashed by her own people.
Doing the inside fight. So, Amie, let's get a little bit more into some of the good weeds. Talk about the attempts of Obama and Nancy Pelosi to do two things. One, to push Biden out, and two, keep Kamala from getting on the stage. Yeah. And that must have been very, very interesting for Barack Obama as a Black man doing that to a Black woman. I'm just saying for the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and this is reported for the first time in Fight, but basically what we found out that Obama is sort of taking a backseat role. He's not as vocal as Nancy Pelosi is. You know, she's out there on Morning Joe. She's out there really forcing the hand. He's kind of calling around and he's talking to the president himself. And, you know, he's saying, you know, he, in the very Obama way that he does, he's like, what's your plan, Joe? What are you, you know, he's trying to get some answers from him. He's not telling him to leave the race. But he's also talking to Pelosi, which we reveal for the first time. You know, they have a couple of calls and they're trying to figure out what to do with Biden and what to do with the party. You know, they both think that Kamala Harris can't win. And so they are kind of hearing, testing the waters on this mini primary idea, which a lot of people at the time were saying was very far-fetched. You know, how can you run a mini primary? How can you do an open convention? But I think they both thought from the outset that she couldn't win. And so they were trying to figure out what to do next. And what's interesting, I think, is just how they're maneuvering. I mean, like I said, she's doing it in a very public way. And she's listening to a lot of people too. She's on the floor of the House talking to people. She's gathering information. She's worried about what's going to happen in the House mostly. And she's also kind of, you know, giving, like, filtering the information and at the same time telling people what she's hearing and what she thinks is best. And I think all along, you know, she thought if Biden goes, she said at one point to someone, if he goes, she goes. And that was sort of her view of that moment.
You know, Pelosi is harbored doubts about Biden's viability before the debate. Now, with the donors, lawmakers in her ear, those doubts swelled. With a wounded candidate at the top of their ticket, Democrats wouldn't be able to turn out voters for down ballot candidates. That didn't turn out to be exactly true. If you know anything about how the game is played, it does. It's more bottom up than top down, and that's pretty much how I won in 2010. I didn't focus on, I got to win the the congressional seat or the Senate seat. No, I need to win that state legislative seat because people vote bottom up.
Right.
And so that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how elections work at the grassroots level. So their premise was off to begin with, so just to connect the dot for folks, which is why I said at the beginning of our conversation in talking about that debate, what was missed, in my view, was the fact that Joe Biden did not hemorrhage his base on debate night after that debate. If they had been smart and followed the Republican playbook, as you saw the Republicans do around Access Hollywood, as you saw the Republicans do around Mexicans are murderers and thieves, and as you've seen Republicans do all the way up to January 6th, is we lock and load around our guy. We don't give them up to the wolves being the political opposition. The Democrats did that, and they do that. And instead of saying, hey, bad debate, dude, you know, he's almost 80. What can I say? The other guy's 78. What do you want me to do about that? He had a bad night. He's our guy. It's over by Monday. Trust me, it's over by Monday. But the reality of it is, because that base was locking around him, but because they were more anchored by the media and political class in Washington, that drove the narrative more so than anything else.
I mean, we have this anecdote in the book, Michael. I mean, this is incredible. 8 days after Joe Biden gets out of the race, he's on Air Force One flying to Texas, and he's on the plane with him are some of his closest allies. He's got Jim Clyburn's one of them, Chris Coons, the senator from Delaware who sits in the seat that Biden once held, and Al Sharpton. And Biden is saying to them, you know, he's very appreciative of them sticking with him, of none of them calling for his ouster. And he looks at Sharpton and he says, you know, Al, you stuck with me, you know, through thick and thin. And I thank you for that. And Sharpton says, well, I was glad to do it. And Biden says, you know, I'll never forget it. And he goes, and now here's who I will never forgive. Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
I mean, that relationship is dead. And I got to say, I mean, I think that was something that look, both of them saw themselves as the savior of democracy.
Yeah.
In the Trump era, right? For Pelosi, it was, it was winning the House in 2018. It was doing the impeachments. It was making sure the certification of the 2020 election happened after January 6th, but on the same day, and coordinating with Mike Pence and Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer to make sure that happened. And for Biden, it was winning in 2020 and ending the Trump term. And so that for a long time, they were both able to claim sort of credit on the Democratic side for this idea that they had really saved America from Donald Trump. And so there was room for both of them to have that view. And at some point, Nancy Pelosi stopped believing that the country needed to be saved by Joe Biden and that the country needed to be saved from Joe Biden. And once that happened, once that happened, their relationship was over.
How the hell do you come? See, this is the part that this is why your book, on the one hand, for me, is just it's just popcorn, folks. I'm telling you, because the frustration. Do you know who the fuck is running on the other side? Do you have any idea who's the opposition here? And yet you're trying to save the country from Joe Biden? Do you know how many Republicans like myself cross the line to support your dumbass party?
Well, I think what's
your price, and you guys are doing all kinds of fuckery in the background to screw it up and not pay attention to the shit we're putting on the table to help you not beat your own dumbass. Do you have any idea what the value of the proposition of 2024 was about? Oh, you don't, bitch? Well, guess what? Look around your dumbass now. You're sitting there in the minority at all three levels, can't do jack shit, and then you got Chuck Schumer up there talking about let's go ahead and give the president the power to go ahead and, to avoid a government shutdown. Oh, while he's raping and pillaging every department and agency and just firing indiscriminately, and now just picking citizens up off the street and hauling them off to fucking El Salvador. And for what? Some internal tribal bullshit between octogenarians? Are you kidding me?